Hey there, everybody. See if you guys can hear me. Give me a thumbs up if you guys can hear me. Okay. Hey there, everybody. This is Leilani with the Magical Solution. We are continuing forward with the reading of the Gospel according to Spiritism by Allan Kardec. Now, those of you who are joining me for the first time, hey there. So those of you who are joining me for the first time, every Thursday, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, I come on here and I read. And the first couple of books that I started off with are the Codices of Spiritism. The first 3 books of Allan Kardec. The first one was the Spirits book. The second one was the Mediums book. And now we are on the Gospel according to Spiritism. After this, I might pick up a few other big influential names in the Spiritist community who have written books and sort of go through a couple of their bestsellers. And the whole point of this is to, just to give light to my community, to have people who have never read the codices before sit in and listen to them. This is also for, people who may have certain developmental or learning disabilities that prevent them from being able to read this particular series. All of that is the reason why I'm doing this, and hopefully you guys have been enjoying it. And also, too, let me know, too, some suggested books that you would like me to read for you guys and cover for you guys. All right. Grab something to drink before we get started. We are on chapter 4, I believe. And this chapter talks about no one can see the kingdom of God unless he is born again. So the title of that chapter sounds super, super Christian, right? And I just want to re-emphasize to you that, this was written at a time where, Christianity was the prevalent religion at the time. It's highly influenced by the jargon and the language that was used at that time. But please know that Spiritism as a whole is not religious. You can make it as religious as you want it to be, okay? So the subcategories for this section are as follows: the resurrection and reincarnation, family ties strengthened by reincarnation but severed by a single existence, and lastly, the spirit's teachings. All right, so let's get to it. Okay. So the chapter begins with a few quotes from the Bible. This one is Matthew 16:13 through 17. And Mark 8:27:30. Jesus, having come to the outskirts of Caesar Philippi, asked his disciples and said to them, "What do men say regarding the Son of Man? Who do they say I am?" And they answered, "Well, some say you are John the Baptist, others Elijah, others Jeremiah or one of the prophets." And Jesus said to them, "And you, who do you say I am?" Simon Peter said to him, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." And Jesus responded to him, "You are blessed, Simon, son of Jonah, because it was neither flesh nor blood that has revealed this to you, but my Father who is in heaven. This next quote is from Mark 6:14 to 15 and Luke 9:7 to 9. Meanwhile, when Herod, the tetrarch, heard about everything that Jesus was doing, his spirit was perplexed, because some were saying that John had come back to life from among the dead, and others that Elijah had appeared, and others that one of the ancient prophets had come back to life. Herod then said, I had John beheaded, so who is this of whom I have heard such great things? And he desired to see him. His disciples asked him, after the transfiguration, by the way, they're asking Jesus, saying, why then do the scribes say that it is necessary for Elijah to come first? But Jesus answered them, it is true that Elijah must come and reestablish all things, but I declare to you that Elijah has already come, and they did not recognize him, but treated him as they wished. It is likewise that they shall cause the Son of Man to suffer. Then his disciples understood that it was John the Baptist about whom he had spoken to them. So, this is sort of the intro into this idea of resurrection and reincarnation. Okay? Now, the Spiritist movement, those who also follow Spiritism, this idea of reincarnation is understood as common law, but at the same time, because of the heavy influence of Catholicism and Christianity, this idea of resurrection is very much prevalent. But the difference is that resurrection is something that we can all attain, if that makes any sense. Like, it's not for one special person. Resurrection is almost like the goal. Okay? Let's move forward. Reincarnation was part of Jewish dogmas under the name resurrection. Only the Sadducees, who thought that everything ended with death, did not believe in it. Jewish ideas on this point, like many others, were not clearly defined because they had only vague and incomplete notions regarding the soul and its connection with the body. They believed that a person who had lived could live again without comprehending the exact manner in which it could happen. They designated by the word resurrection what Spiritism more correctly calls reincarnation. Actually, resurrection supposes the return to life of the body that died, which science has demonstrated to be materially impossible, especially when the elements of that body were dispersed and absorbed long ago. Reincarnation is the return of a soul or a spirit to corporal life, but in another body, newly formed for it and having nothing in common with the old one. The word resurrection might thus be applied to Lazarus, but not to Elijah or the other prophets. Hence, if according to their belief John the Baptist was Elijah, John's body could not have been Elijah's, since John had been seen as a child and his mother and father were known. John then could be Elijah reincarnated, but not resuscitated. No one can see the kingdom of God unless he is born again. Now, there was a man among the Pharisees named Nicodemus, a senator of the Jews, who went at night to meet Jesus and said to him, Rabbi, we know you have come from God to instruct us as a doctor, for no one could perform the miracles you are doing if God were not with him. And Jesus answered, well, verily, verily, I say to you, no one can see the kingdom of God unless he is born again. And Nicodemus said to him, "Well, how can a man who is already old be born? Can he enter his mother's womb in order to be born a second time?" And Jesus responded, "Verily, verily, I say to you, if a man is not born again of water and the Spirit, he cannot enter the kingdom of God. Whatever is born from flesh is flesh, and whatever is born from spirit is spirit. Do not be surprised that I have said to you that it is necessary for you to be born again. The Spirit blows wherever it wishes, and you hear its voice, but you do not know where it comes from or where it is going. The same occurs with every man who is born of the Spirit." And Nicodemus replied to him, "How can this be?" And Jesus said to him, "You are a teacher in Israel, and yet you are unaware of these things? Verily, verily, I say to you that we say only what we know, and that we testify only to what we have seen. Yet you have not accepted our testimony. But if you do not believe me when I speak about things of the earth, how will you believe me when I speak to you about things of heaven?" Psh, burn. Jesus burnt him. The thought that John the Baptist was Elijah and that the prophets could live on the earth may be found in many passages of the Gospels, especially in those indicated above. If this belief had been in error, Jesus would not have failed to combat in just as he combated so many others. But far from it, he sanctioned it with all his authority and set it as a principle and necessary condition when he said, "No one can see the kingdom of heaven if he is not born again." And he insisted, adding, "Do not be surprised that I have said it is necessary for you to be born again." The words, "if a man is not born again of water and of spirit," have been interpreted in the sense of regeneration through the waters of baptism. But the original text simply stated, "not born again of water and of the Spirit." Whereas in some translations, the words "of the Spirit" have been replaced by "of the Holy Spirit," which no longer implies the same thought. This crucial point stands out in the first commentaries written on the Gospels and will someday be confirmed beyond a doubt. In order to understand the real meaning of these words, one must also pay attention to the significance of the word water, which has not been employed in its proper acceptation. The ancients' knowledge regarding the physical sciences was highly imperfect because they believed that the earth had risen from the waters, and that is the reason they regard water as the absolute generative element. That is why it is stated in Genesis that the Spirit of God hovered over the waters. It hovered over the surfaces of the waters. Let there be firmament in the midst of the waters. Let the waters that are under the heavens be gathered together into one place, and let that dry element appear. Let the waters produce living animals that swim in the water and the birds that fly above the earth and under the firmament. According to this belief, water became the symbol of the material nature, just as spirit was the symbol of the intelligent nature. The words, "if a man is not born again of water and of spirit," or "in water and in the Spirit," thus means if humans are not born again with their body and their soul. This is the sense in which these words were originally understood. Moreover, such an interpretation is justified by these words. Whatever is born of flesh is flesh, and whatever is born of the Spirit is spirit. So here, Jesus makes a positive distinction between spirit and body. Whatever is born of the flesh clearly indicates that only the body proceeds from the body and that the spirit is independent of it. The Spirit blows wherever it wishes, and you hear its voice, but you do not know where it comes from or where it is going. May be understood either as the Spirit of God, who gives life to whoever God wishes, or the human soul. Now, in this later accipitation, you do not know where it comes from or where it is going, means that no one knows what the Spirit had been or what it will be. So, if the spirit or soul were created at the same time as the body, one would know where it came from because one would know it's the beginning. In any case, this passage is the concentration of the principle of the pre existence of the soul, and consequently, the plurality of existences. Matthew 11, 12, 15. Now, since the time of John the Baptist until the present, the kingdom of heaven has been taken by violence, and violent are those who obtain it. For up until John, all the prophets and the law thus prophesied. And if you wish to understand what I have said, he himself is Elijah who must come. Let him hear who has ears to hear. So, if the principle of reincarnation, as expressed in John, could be strictly interpreted in a purely mystical sense, the same could apply to the passage from Matthew, which is unmistakable. He himself is Elijah who must come. Here, there is neither symbol nor allegory, it is a positive affirmation. Since the time of John the Baptist until the present, the kingdom of heaven has been taken by violence. What do these words mean since John the Baptist was still alive at that time? Jesus explains them saying, if you wanted to understand that I have what I have told you, he himself is Elijah who must come. Hence, since John was none other than Elijah himself, Jesus was alluding to the time when John was living under the name Elijah. So until the present, the kingdom has been taken by violence. Another allusion to the violence of the Mosaic law, which ordered the extermination of the infidels to win the promised land back, the paradise of the Hebrews, whereas according to the new law, heaven is won by charity and kindness. Then he added, let him who has ears to hear, let him hear who has ears to hear. That's what he said. So these words are so frequently repeated by Jesus, clearly state that not everyone was in a condition to understand certain truths. So, for example, in Isaiah 26:19, those of your people who have been made to die shall live again. Those who have been slain around me shall live again. Awaken from your sleep and sing the praises of God, you who dwell in the dust, because the dew that falls upon you is the dew of light, and because you shall destroy the earth and the kingdom of the giants. This passage from Isaiah is also quite explicit. Those of your people who have been made to die shall live again. If the prophet had intended to speak of the spirit life, if he had wanted to say that those who had been made to die were not dead in spirit, he would have said that. He would have said, still live, and not will live again. In the sense of the spirit, these words would be a contradiction since they would imply an interpretation in the life of the soul. In the sense of moral regeneration, however, they would be a negation of eternal punishment, since in principle they establish that all those who are dead will live again. Job 14:10 and 14. But when a man has died once, when his body separated from his spirit and has been consumed, what does he become? Having died once, can he live again? In this war in which I find myself every day of my life, I wait for my transformation to come. When a man dies, he loses all his strength and expires. Afterward, where is he? If a man dies, will he live again? Will I wait all the days of my struggle until that one in which some kind of transformation comes to me? When a man has died, he lives forever. The days of my earthly existence ending, I will wait, because to it I shall return. So, the principle of plurality of existence is clearly expressed in these three versions. It cannot be assumed that Job wanted to speak of regeneration through the waters of baptism, which he, of course, did not know about. But when a man has died once, could he live again? The idea of dying once and living again implies dying and living again several times. Now, the Greek Orthodox version, which is the last version that we read, it's even more explicit, if that's even possible. The days of my earthly existence ending, I will wait, because to it I shall return, which means I shall return to earthly existence. That is as clear as if someone were to say, I'm leaving my house so I can return to my house. In this war in which I find myself every day of my life, I wait for my transformation to come. Job obviously wanted to speak of the struggle he bore against the miseries of life. He awaits his transformation, meaning he had resigned himself. In the Greek version, I will wait seems especially to apply to a new existence. The days of my earthly existence ending, I will wait, because to it I shall return. Job seems to place himself after death in the interval that separates one's existence from another, and says that there he will wait for his return. Hence, there is no doubt that under the name resurrection, the principle of reincarnation was one of the fundamental beliefs of the Jews. That it was confirmed by Jesus and the prophets formally, from which it follows that to deny reincarnation is to deny the words of Christ himself. So someday his words will comprise an authority regarding this point, like many others, and when they are meditated upon without preconceived ideas. However, to this authority that arises from the religious point of view is added the philosophical point of view of the proofs that result from observing the facts. When one wants to go from the effects to the cause, reincarnation emerges as an absolute necessity, a condition inherent to the humanity. In other words, as a law of nature. It reveals itself by its results in a way that is material, so to speak. Like a hidden motor reveals itself by the movement. Only the doctrine of reincarnation can tell human beings where they come from, where they are going, and why they are here on earth. All justify all the anomalies and all the apparent injustices that life presents. Without the principle of the preexistence of the soul and the plurality of existences, most of the maxims that are in the Gospels are unintelligible. And that is why they have given way to such contradictory interpretations. This principle is the key that must restore them to their true meaning. So now the next subsection of this chapter is entitled Family Ties Strengthened by Reincarnation but Severed by a Single Existence. Let's see what the hell that means, right? So, family ties are not destroyed by reincarnation as certain persons believe. On the contrary, they are strengthened and become tighter. It is the opposite principle that does destroy them. See, in the spirit world, spirits form groups or families united by affection, sympathy, and similar inclinations. These spirits, happy at being together, seek out one another. Incarnations separates them only momentarily, because after their reentry into the errant state, they meet again, like friends who have returned from a journey. Frequently, they even follow one another into incarnations, whereas wherein they are reunited in the same family or the same circle, working together for their mutual advancement. If some are incarnate while others are not, they are nevertheless united by thought. Those who are free watch over those who are captive. The more advanced you try to help, the less advanced to progress. After each existence, they will have taken a step on the path towards perfection, less and less attached to matter, and their affection is more alive due to that fact. And that since their spirit has become more purified, it is no longer troubled by selfishness or the clouds of the passions. They can therefore pass through an unlimited number of corporal existences without any harm affecting their mutual affection. It is to be understood that we are here referring to real affection from soul to soul, the only affection that survives the destruction of the body, because beings of this world who are united to one another only through the senses have no reason to look for each other in the world of spirits. There are no lasting affections except spiritual ones. Physical affections die out with the cause that gave rise to them, but that cause no longer exists in the world of spirits, whereas the soul exists forever. As for persons united by the sole reason of self-interest, they really do not mean anything to each other, and death separates them both in heaven and on earth. The union and affection that exists between family members are an indication of a former sympathy that has brought them together. One also says of someone whose character, tastes, and inclinations have no similarity to those of their closest relatives, and that he or she is not of that family. Saying this declares a greater truth that one might suppose. God allows such incarnations of antipathetic or foreign spirits within families with the dual objective of serving as a trial for some and as a means of advancement for others. The evil ones better themselves little by little through contact with the good ones and the care they receive from them. Their character becomes milder, sorry. Their habits are more purified. It is thus that the fusion amongst different categories of spirits is established and occurs on the earth amongst ethnicities and cultures. The fear of the unending increasing of kinship as a consequence of reincarnation is a selfish fear, which demonstrates that one does not feel a sufficiently broad love to carry it over to a large number of individuals. Does a father who has many children love them all any less than he would if he had only one? But selfish people may rest at ease because such a fear is without foundation. From the fact that one man has had 10 incarnations, it does not follow that in the spirit world he will encounter 10 fathers, 10 mothers, 10 wives, and a proportional number of children and new relatives. There will always There he will always re encounter only the same objects of his affection, and those who had been connected with him while on earth under various relationships, or perhaps even the same ones. Let us now look at the consequences of the non reincarnation doctrine. The doctrine necessarily annuls the pre existence of the soul. Since souls are created at the same time as the body, there are no previous links between them. They are complete strangers to one another. The father is a stranger to his child. The kinship between families is thus reduced solely to the corporal kinship without any spiritual link. There is therefore no reason to glorify oneself for having had such and such famous personages as your ancestors. With reincarnation, ancestors and descendants may have known each other, lived together, loved each other, and find themselves reunited later on in order to tighten their bonds of sympathy. All this has to do with the past. And as for the future, according to one of the fundamental dogmas resulting from non reincarnation, the destiny of souls is irrevocably set after one soul existence. This definitive fixing of their destiny implies the cessation of all progress, because if there is any progress at all, there is no longer a definitive destiny. Depending on whether they have lived well or badly, they go immediately either to the dwelling place of the blessed or the eternal hell, and hence they are immediately separated forever without hope of ever being united again. so that fathers, mothers, and children, and husbands, and wives, and brothers, and sisters, and friends are never certain of seeing each other again. It is the most complete rupture of the family ties. With reincarnation and the idea of progress that results from it, all those who have loved one another meet again on earth and in space, gravitating together to reach God. Those who fail along the way delay their advancement and happiness, but all hope is not lost. Helped, encouraged, and upheld by those who love them, they will one day exit the quagmire in which they have been immersed. So, in short, with reincarnation, there is ongoing solidarity between incarnates and discarnates, and hence the tightening of the bonds of affection. In summary, four alternatives are presented to humans for their future beyond the grave. First is nothingness, according to the materialistic doctrine. Second is absorption into the universal whole, according to the pantheistic doctrine. Third is individuality with a definitive fixed fate, according to the church's doctrine. And fourth is individuality with unending progress, according to the Spiritist doctrine. Now, according to the first two, family ties are broken after death, and there is no hope of meeting again. With the third, there is a chance family members will see each other again, provided they are in the same environment, and this environment might be hell as well as heaven. With the plurality of existences which is inseparable from gradual progression, there is certainty about the continuity of relationships between those who love one another. And this is what comprises a true family. And now we are on the last part of this chapter, the Spirit's teachings. So, as you remember, when we go through these books, each chapter has a section that sort of allows the interview with a spirit to take place, and the spirit gets a chance to sort of talk on these subjects that the chapter was on. So the question to the spirit is, what are the limits of incarnation? And the answer from the spirit is, incarnation per se does not have precisely traced limits if the term is understood as referring to the envelope that comprises the body of the spirit. Considering the fact that the materiality of this envelope diminishes as the spirit purifies itself. On certain worlds more advanced than Earth, the body is less compact, less heavy, less coarse, and consequently less subject to vicissitudes. At a higher degree, it is diaphanous and almost fluidic. Degree by degree, it is dematerialized and ends up melding with the perispirit, depending on the world on which the spirit is called to live. The spirit takes on the envelope appropriate to the nature of the world. The perispirit itself endures successive transformations. It becomes more and more etherealized each time up to the complete purification which characterizes pure spirits. If special worlds are meant as a station for highly advanced spirits, then such spirits are not connected. There are no on the lower worlds. The state of detachment in which they find themselves enables them to go anywhere the missions entrusted to them may call them. So basically, what he's saying here is that, when as your spirit goes through purification, continues to do this with each lifetime, your physical body begins to dematerialize. You become less physical and you're more spiritual, in the sense that you become like a fluid, like a shapeless fluid entity thing. And with that, there are levels in which you can maintain that frequency, and then there are the lower levels that you would have to sort of come back into materialization in order to interact with those um, lower frequencies. And that takes its toll. It definitely does. But it can't go the other way around. The material cannot just dematerialize and become a pure spirit. Like the pure spirit aspect of this whole thing is your goal. That's what you're doing each incarnation. You're trying to purify yourself. So that's not something you can just sort of like meditate and boom, you can do that. That's not how it works. If incarnation is considered from the material point of view, as the case here on Earth, it could be stated that it is limited to less evolved worlds. It therefore depends on the spirit to free itself quickly or less quickly by working for its purification. One must also consider the fact that in an errant state, that is, in the intervals between corporal existences, the situation of the spirit is in keeping with the nature of the world to which it is connected according to its degree of advancement. That in the errant state, it is more or less happy, free, enlightened according to that degree of its dematerialization. Another question that is posed to the spirit: is incarnation a punishment, and are only guilty spirits subject to it? And the spirit's response is: the passage of spirits through corporal life is necessary so that they may accomplish, with the help of physical action, the designs whose execution God has entrusted to them. This is necessary for them because the activity they are obliged to perform helps the development of their intelligence. God, being supremely just, must regard all his children equally, and that is why he gives all of them the same starting point, the same aptitude, the same obligations to fulfill, and the same freedom to act. Any privilege would be a preference, and any preference an injustice. But incarnation is nothing for all spirits but a transitory state. It is a task that God imposes on them upon their entry into life as the first test of the use they will make of their free will. Those who eagerly fulfill this task quickly and less painfully clear their first degree of initiation and enjoy the fruits of their labor sooner. On the other hand, those who make bad use of the freedom that God has granted them delay their advancement. It is thus that their obstinacy, they may prolong indefinitely the need to reincarnate. And it is that point that incarnation becomes a punishment. So basically, the only punishment about incarnation is that you do it to yourself, pretty much. Like, that's what he's saying. He's like, the whole goal is to attain spiritual perfection and to work towards that. Obviously, you are not going to reach 100% attainment in this lifetime. It's going to take several lifetimes. But that's the goal. So here's a comment from the author regarding what the spirit said. A rough comparison will make this difference more understandable. Students can reach degrees of knowledge only after having passed through the series of classes leading to it. These classes, whatever the work they require, are a means for reaching the objective and not a punishment. Diligent students shorten the way and encounter fewer thorns along it. It is otherwise for those whose negligence and laziness obligate them to repeat certain classes. It is not the classwork that is a punishment, but the obligation to recommence the same work. Right? So it's about being consistent. It's about having integrity. It's about doing the thing even when you don't want to do the thing. The same applies to humankind on earth. For the spirits of primitives, again, I have to reiterate this every single time I read his books. You have to remember the time frame in which he wrote this. where he was writing it from, and the language that they used back then. Not great. Not great. For the spirits of the primitives, who are nearly at the beginning of their spirit lives, incarnation is a means of developing their intelligence. However, for educated individuals in whom the moral sense is broadly developed and who are obligated to recommence the steps of a corporal life full of anguish when they could have already reached the objective, it is a punishment because of their need to prolong their stay on lower and unfortunate worlds. On the other hand, those who work actively for their moral progress not only shorten the duration of their physical incarnation, but they may all at once transcend the intermediate degrees that separate them from the more highly evolved worlds. Might spirits incarnate only once on the same globe and fulfill their many existences on different spheres? This opinion would be acceptable only if all the humans on Earth were at the same intellectual and moral level. The difference among them from primitives to civilized individuals show that many degrees that they are called to ascend. Moreover, an incarnation must have a useful purpose. But what would be a useful purpose of the ephemeral incarnations of children who die very young? They would have suffered without profiting either themselves or others. God, whose laws are all supremely wise, does nothing useless. Through reincarnation on the same globe, God has willed that the same spirits come into contact with one another again for the chance to repair their mutual offenses. Because of their previous relationship, God wishes furthermore to establish family ties on a spiritual basis and to support the principle of solidarity, fraternity, and equality as natural law. So let me make something clear with regards to this, okay? So, when you think about a lot of the Christian doctrine and, and even the secret societies and a lot of the offshoots of these Christian ideas, Freemasons, this, that, you'll notice that there is a congruency regarding brotherhood, fraternity, family ties, keeping the units together, right? This idea of loyalty and groupthink and all that stuff. Now, from the outside looking in, that seems like super creepy. You're like, oh man, that's like military, that's like militant, that's like brainwashing and cult like. But there is something to be said about this when we're looking at it from these perspectives. What these spirits are actually talking about is the collective spiritual consciousness. That's what they're talking about. They're talking about the power of the spirit that could manifest and, make changes in the world that have been developed by the entire fraternity, by the entire brotherhood, or in this particular case, by the entire world, right? The problem is that, like he discusses in the chapter, not everyone is at the same degree of spiritual advancement, and this idea, not spiritual advancement, spiritual purification. Not everyone is at the same degree of that. And so this is why, as a collective, we can't do that yet. It requires a lot more worldwide participation. Okay. Oh, okay, great. So that is the end of the 4th chapter, and we have 15 minutes left, which means if you have any questions about what we just read, about Spiritism in general, or just any other sort of existential spiritual questions you might have floating around in your mind, I can try my best to answer them according to Kardec doctrine. In the meantime, hello, Lady Rose. I am great. You can tell that I'm still sort of working through my cold. Chapter 5 is for next week. And chapter 5, the title of that is called Blessed Are the Afflicted. And the subcategories are the justice of afflictions, current causes of afflictions, prior causes of afflictions, forgetfulness of the past, reasons for resigning oneself, suicide and insanity, the Spirit's teachings to suffer well or badly, evil and its remedy, happiness is not of the world. This is a very, very in depth chapter. The loss of loved ones, premature deaths. If he had been a good man, would he have died? Voluntary suffering, truth, misfortune, melancholy, voluntary trials, true sackcloth. Should we put an end to our neighbor's trials? Is it permissible to shorten the life of a patient who is suffering with no hope of a cure? Sacrificing one's own life, making one's own suffering profitable for others. Oof, what a mouthful. That's a lot. So that's for next week. And I can already tell by this chapter title that we are going to get a lot of pushback, a lot of backlash if people come into these lives half cocked, like if they don't come in with a full understanding. So I want to make something really clear. When we are talking about causes of affliction, please know that some of the language that's going to be used will kind of sound very like star seedy in the sense of like, we are responsible for our responses, blah, 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 blah. But I need you to understand that as we go through it, there's a rationale in terms of what the spirits mean by that, not what the writer means, okay? Because the writer is just a guy, right? And there's no victim blaming in that definition. And I'll explain that when we go through it. Number two, we're also going to be talking about suicides and involuntarily ending your own life. This is a very hot button subject, a lot of mental health stuff going on as well in the environment. So I just need you to know that this is not the end all be all. This is one person's perspective, okay? This is one train of thought, okay? Take it with a grain of salt. They're also covering in here, miscarriages and like losing a child. They're also covering in here if you see your neighbor suffering or you see a patient or a family member suffering, can you kill them? Like a mercy kill. So there's questions in here that are going to really be triggering for a lot of people, and I just want you to just, if you're not open to that, then next week don't come to this live. But if you are open to it, digest it in pieces. We'll do it together. Don't worry. I'm not going to leave you hanging. In the meantime, any questions before I go? Any questions? Spiritism, Spiritismo, spirits, the Allan Kardec books, anything. We start at 7 p.m. 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Every Thursday night we do this. And then every Sunday night at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, I have a YouTube podcast where I interview people in the spiritual community and we talk about all things spiritual, and it's great. That's every Sunday. Every Friday, I teach classes. And then the rest of the week, I serve my community. Very good. Oh, I love to hear that. Keep going, Lady Rose. Keep going. Take everything in slowly with discernment. Pick it apart. Don't be afraid to not commit to something until you're sure. It's tiring. Yes. Yeah, it'll be a fun thing because for me, I know I know the Espiritismo viewpoint of it, but okay, so and so yeah, it's gonna be an interesting take. All right. Well, then if that's the case, I'm gonna let you guys go so I can drink some water and get ready for a reading that I have to give in about 15 minutes. So have a beautiful night. I will see you guys here not on TikTok, YouTube and Facebook for Sunday's interviews. I do TikToks only on Thursdays. I appreciate you too, honey. And good seeing you again, Alex. All right, guys, take it easy. Okay, how do I? There we go. There we